hardwire connection, which has resolved that. Because you were kind of feeding in and out and good and bad and so forth yesterday. So that may help you. It helped me.
I can't do that for today because my modem is upstairs where Mo does her painting. And so for me to be plugged in there really restricts what she can do during the day. So what I've done today is I've got video on my laptop, I've got my phone for the sound, and I'm only using one screen. Like I've got another computer here, but I've got the Wi-Fi shut off. So I'm hoping that that will make a difference.
Hey, Tony, you don't have any other wall Ethernet ports in your house? There should be some someplace.
I'll have to check that out. It's just I've never looked because I never used them. There may be some. What do they look like?
Like a telephone jack.
Yeah,
but a little bit different, a little bit wider.
I've got telephone jacks in different places. I don't think they're computer ports. This house is 20 years old, so they maybe didn't fit them up the way they would today.
Yeah, it could be.
Vivian, are you there? Can you hear me, Vivian?
Kristen, do I need to read out that statement that I did at the beginning of yesterday's meeting about the virtual meetings? Do I need to read that out today as well?
Yes.
It is a requirement, isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
Okay.
Different meeting.
I will do it. What's that?
It's a different meeting.
Yeah, it's just such a long thing to go through, but I suppose I have to follow the rules.
Well, it's the ministerial order that's the difficult one, or the important one, I think. M192.
We haven't got that on here.
Oh, that's the one we read out in Squamish all the time.
Do you actually read it out, Doug, or do you just move it and?
Well, we do both, just basically for public ease of understanding. So that's, but it's a resolution that we pass at the start of every meeting. So we pass one for committee of the whole, one for special, etc.
Yeah, I just noticed it's not in this agenda. I didn't pick that up. How am I going to do that? Kristen, could you read that out for me off yesterday's agenda?
Yeah.
So if we approve the agenda and then, no, I think we should do it before we approve the agenda.
Yeah, sorry about, yeah.
Either way, I think I don't think it matters.
No. So how are we doing here for people? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've got 2 telephone symbols on here. Is one Russell?
Yes, one is Russell.
Is one Mike?
Mike, I don't think
It looks
Mike.
like it's you, Chair.
I think it's Vivian and Russell, and Mike is just coming into the meeting right now.
I'm not on by telephone, just by laptop.
We have a phone. We have your phone number showing as with a phone.
I think
Okay.
that's Chair Rainbow's phone number. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, is that,
Oh, is it?
sorry, Director Birch Jones, is that your phone number there, Tony, at the bottom?
No.
Yeah, I believe. Director Birch Jones, do you see the two telephone boxes?
I do. Our area code is 250, and those are both 604s.
One of the 604s is the mobile number for Chair Rainbow.
Is it? I don't see it on there, but okay, well, that's fine. That's fine.
Maybe they don't see what we do, Krista.
Oh, that's mine. I can see that. I saw it when it lit up just now. Yeah, that's mine. Okay. Very good. So I will call this meeting to order. We'd like to recognize that collectively we are on the unceded territories of all of the First Nations within our regional boundaries. Kristen, would you mind? Well, I'll read this whole declaration first. This meeting of the board is being held virtually with all meeting participants attending via electronic communications in order to adhere to the provincial health officer's orders respecting physical distancing requirements as a measure to prevent the transmission of COVID-19. Directors will be involved in and participate in the meeting. For the closed portion of the meeting, directors confirm that they are alone and that the meeting can only be heard and seen by them. If available, directors will wear headphones for the closed portion of the meeting. Directors are to identify themselves when advising the chair that they wish to be placed on the speakers list, and this will be done by raising their hands. The chair will record the order in which the hands are raised and will allow the directors to speak in the order in which they are recorded. If directors are unable to raise their hands due to being in audio mode, they will verbally advise the chair of their intention to speak. Directors will mute their device unless they wish to speak. The chair may also choose to mute the microphones, and the directors may unmute the microphones on their own accord when required. With respect to a vote, directors are only required to state a nay vote, i.e., directors are not required to voice a yea vote. Directors attending the meeting are required to verbally advise the chair of when they leave the meeting and return to the meeting so that this can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. For clarity, if a director does not verbally advise the chair but is observed to be absent from their video feed and their video feed remains turned on and it is unclear to staff whether they are present in the meeting, the director will be marked absent from the meeting until such time as staff observes the director to reappear in the video feed. Directors will text message the CAO if they have a technical difficulty with their computer or telephone. That is, they need to be reconnected to the meeting. If directors are unable to text the CEO, the directors will email the chair. If a technical difficulty occurs and it becomes apparent that a director has become disconnected from the meeting will be recessed until the connection status of the director has been determined, at which time the meeting will be reconvened with or without the director present, provided the meeting's quorum is maintained. Directors who declare a conflict of interest in respect of an agenda item will be directed to the virtual waiting room while the board considers the agenda item. Once the board completes its consideration of such agenda item, the director will be readmitted to the virtual meeting room. Directors who are present within the virtual waiting room are asked to stay at their computer or otherwise remain present and connected to their computer if possible for the entire duration of their time in the waiting room, so as not to miss their readmittance into the virtual meeting room. If possible, any chat functionality of the application will be disabled, and if this is not possible to disable, directors will not use this chat functionality during the meeting. Thank you for your patience. Kristen, would you mind reading that M192? This doesn't appear on the agenda, but we need to have a resolution to deal with this.
Thank you, Chair. That pursuant to Ministerial Order number M192, the Committee of the Whole is excluding in-person public attendance at this October 29th, 2020 meeting on the basis that the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District continues to be in the process of assessing its ability to facilitate in-person public attendance in a manner consistent with public health orders and recommendations, and putting the necessary safeguards in place to protect the public and staff members, and the SLRD is ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability at this meeting by the following means. This meeting is being live streamed, and a video of this meeting will be available on the SLRD website for viewing on an on-demand basis.
Thank you. I need a resolution moved by Director Race, second by Director Elliott. For the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Director Elliott, second Director De Meyer. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. If I may just ask you, can you hear me clearly today? Yeah, okay, good. So now we come to the most important part of the meeting. I was about to say that by the mayor. A regional moment, the District of Squamish. Yay, well, at least one of the Squamish directors is excited.
I really appreciate Director Race's enthusiasm. Good morning, everyone. What I wanted to share today was about housing. And on Monday, our council had the ability to tour the new Under One Roof facility, which is being opened in partnership between the Helping Hands Society and Squamish, BC Housing, District of Squamish. And this is a facility that will provide 63 beds for our hardest to house. And so approximately 45 of those units are individual apartments or shared apartments. And then there's shelter beds as well for those who need to come in and out of the cold. It's a beautiful building. It's just kitty corner from City Hall. Its name, I think, represents the vision that Maureen McKell had for Under One Roof, which is to put the services that these folks need all under one roof. On the bottom floor, the food bank has moved in and has actually created a marketplace. So it's actually a grocery store. And it's filled with donated food as well as food rescues. So it actually has a cold section and a freezer section. And anyone can use it. So you can go by and provide a donation, or if you don't have the funds, you can just go and shop and get the food that you need for yourself or your family. So it's just been an amazing resource and really has ramped up our food rescue capabilities within the District of Squamish, and I think provides a bit more dignity to create a venue where people can shop for their own food. And so just next to that is a laundromat. So this will become a bit of a social enterprise for Under One Roof, some low barrier housing. It's got big commercial washer and dryers, but also facilities to wash and sort donated clothing for the residents of the building. And then finally, there's counseling rooms. There's primary care facilities there, room for outreach workers, and mental health and wellness workers. So it's all there under one roof. They have currently some of the best views in the city. It's amazing what Maureen has created there for these citizens of our community. So it was really thrilling actually to get a walk through. Oh, I forgot, on the main floor is an amazing commercial kitchen. And so they'll be providing 2 meals a day. There's a dining room. There's a place. There's an outdoor patio. For the residents, and some community gardens. There's also a seating area with telephones and computer areas. There's also showers for those that are dropping in. And each stall has a toilet, a shower, and a sink so that people can take care of their needs in one place just off the main floor there. So it's a really thoughtful building. It will become, I think, an important hub in our community. It's there to be open to everyone. And it should be open in a couple of weeks. So they're just putting the final touches, putting beds together, furnishing the rooms, and then hopefully we'll be cutting ribbons and moving folks in. In the meantime, we're working with BC Housing to try and locate another project in the district to do one step up from under one roof. So for those who still need support, but are probably employed or a bit further along in their journey. So that's our next effort around that. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share that progress that we've made on a really important build in Squamish. I'm happy for Councillor Race to add anything that he feels that I might have missed.
Thank you.
Chair. The only other thing I would add is I was part of the tour on Monday, but that building, like the shelter before it, that it replaces, is actually intended to serve the corridor. It's not just Squamish. And so they have clientele. There is a vetting process. It's primarily for what are referred to as locals, but that's locals in the corridor, not just Squamish. It's quite interesting because the topic today is affordable housing and so forth. But we've had some success with BC Housing and with this present government. And the deal that they look for is the district supplies the land and they supply the money to put a housing program together. And now I'm getting feedback. But so far it's worked out well for us. And as the mayor says, we're now, this is one. We have another one that's just about to break ground. And now we're starting to think about a third. All sort of catering to different levels in the housing stratum.
Oh, I think is my sound on?
Where the funding comes from to the ongoing funding, how does that work?
So the capital is provided by BC Housing to do the build.
Yeah.
And then they contract with, in this case, Helping Hands, and they provide operating funds. And then Helping Hands, of course, is, to cover all of their operating costs as fundraising and that sort of thing. But the staffing and operating of the building is provided by BC Housing.
What a great project. Congratulations, you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Director DeMere?
Just curious on the total cost of that project. It sounds incredible. Just awesome work, you guys.
Director Reyes, do you remember? Sal, I can get that for you. I can't remember offhand.
Okay, thank you.
We waived fees and provided the land and did some extra engineering work to make it functional. And then BC Housing really contributed the rest. So I'll get that for you. Send you.
Is there also a link to it somewhere?
Yeah. Under one roof. I'm just trying to think of the ending, whether it's org or .ca. Hold on a second. Director Race, did you want to add something?
There was some funding provided. I asked the director, Marie McKell, about some of the extras and the furnishings and so forth. And in the society itself, which is just a basic charity, provided about $1.5 million worth of furnishings and extras and so forth above and beyond BC Housing structure. So they do that by a variety of fundraising methods and some grants.
Under one roof, Squamish.ca.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions for Aaron or Doug? Director Burke-Jones.
I'm so impressed. Thank you for the presentation, and I can imagine the amount of work getting there. We need one of those in every community. I'm just wondering, I'm the last person in the world that should give technical advice, but I'm hearing quite And I do notice that not all the mics are muted. And I wonder, Chair Rainbow, if you could mute your mic, and if Russell, are you able to do that with yours?
Yes, Vivian, I'm already muted while I was, and I'll mute again here as soon as I finish talking.
Yeah, and I'm trying to be helpful.
Same with me, Vivian. Unless I'm speaking, I've got my microphone on mute, and I'll mute it again right now.
I guess that's the best we can do then. Thank you.
Tony, if you're talking on the phone, your mic on your computer should be turned off.
The mic on my computer is turned off, according to my computer.
Okay, then I don't have an answer.
It doesn't look like it is, Chair Rainbow, on the Zoom screen.
Okay, now that he's gone. Oh, no.
I've now joined with computer audio and I've turned my phone off.
That is much better.
Is that better? Okay. Then we'll proceed along those lines. So
Oh, I spoke too soon. Sorry.
Yeah, it's still bouncing back, isn't it? I have no idea what the problem is. There's nothing else. I've only got one computer turned on. I haven't even got the other screen open.
I'm going to try to mute Director Mack on my end and see if that helps. Okay.
Let's proceed with number 4.1 CAO verbal update.
Thank you, Chair Rainbow. The only thing I wanted to share today is just to let the board know some of the efforts that staff are making in this virtual world to still be connected with each other. We're having weekly meetings within the different departments and also weekly management meetings. And we're having monthly meetings, which are called Flagpole Meetings, virtual Flagpole Meetings, where all the staff can connect and share what they're working on, what their challenges are, how they feel about working in this remote world. And it's all over the map. Some people are like craving that face-to-face office contact, and some people just thrive in working from home. But that way we can all connect with each other and still have those opportunities for the human interaction that you want and find. You have to actually carve time out for it rather than have it happening accidentally when you go to fill your water glass or something. But we are doing that, and I think it's really good, especially for me coming in new, to connect with and get to know the people, and for everyone who has workplace friends that they don't get to see day to day, to stay in contact and to make sure that we still have that cross-pollination of information within the organization. So I just wanted to share that today. Thank you.
Kristen.
Thank you. I just wanted to, before we move on, I just wanted to see if things seem to be better with Director Mack muted. And it seems to be. Does everyone agree? So I just want to make sure that Director Mack can unmute himself from his end, because I'm not sure he can.
Oh dear.
So I'm going to try and unmute him here for a minute.
It's okay. We spoke earlier. He said he had nothing to say today.
We can't lose him.
Oh, there he is.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Did you unmute yourself, Director Mack?
Yes, I did.
You were able to do that. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm gonna mute you again.
Okay.
And you can.
And do you want me to mute my phone as well? Because I have been doing that. I've got it on mute pretty much all the time.
Sure. And I'll also mute you.
Okay, I can hear everything that's going on.
Okay. So.
Okay, so I'm going to mute my phone right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, that does make a difference. Okay, 4.2, information report, current SLRD housing policies. And we have Kim and Claire. I'm not sure who's going to be speaking, but welcome both of you, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is just a general report to outline our various affordable housing policies that we have in the SLRD, and we have quite a few, ranging from policies that are in our regional growth strategy, policies in our various OCPs and zoning bylaws, information that came out of our housing need and demand study, which we'll be incorporating some bylaw changes based on the results of that study. And it also talks a little bit about the history of affordable housing, wherein we did have a elected officials forum that was specific to affordable housing back in December of 2016. Some of you were there. And the report on that presentation is attached to this report. At that time, basically we presented all of the different initiatives that were going on in the regional district with the member municipalities as well as the SLRD. And we introduced the concept of a regional housing authority because we have heard and we do continue to hear that there are concerns about how affordable housing could be managed. At the time in 2016, the concept of a regional housing authority to administer housing in the region didn't gain any traction with the elected officials forum. And another thing that we've done recently, as a couple of months ago, we updated our community amenity contributions policy to speak to affordable housing and how we can collect funds for that. So the board is aware, when this report was written, we hadn't seen Director Rainbow's director's report. So we wrote this report sort of without the information contained in his report. And since preparing this report, we did review some of the excellent, comments that were raised by Director Rainbow. And I don't know if you want me to get into those, but we did have some staff input and comments with respect to some of the items that Director Rainbow raises in his director's report. So I don't know if you want us to speak to that now or if we should wait until we get into the next item.
I think wait, please, Kim.
Okay. Yeah, so if there are any questions about the report, just let me know.
Okay, any questions for Kim? Director to Mayor, and then Director Birch-Jones.
Yeah, in the Area A, and specifically short-term rentals, there's still some movement from the BRVCA Economic Development Subcommittee on Housing, because we're looking at, they are looking at trying to do some affordable rental units in Goldbridge. And they've got a partnership agreement with the Shalaft First Nations, the Shalaft Development Corporation. And they're on their way to hopefully get something happening. But the whole concept of the short-term rentals, I know we still haven't agreed on that policy. Just wondering when that's going to take place.
Yeah, so we did get a resolution from the boards a couple of months ago, and it was directing us to bring back a report on short-term rentals and temporary use permits with respect to areas C and A. We are working on a report. It's looking like the direction we're going is to basically have a definition that would define bed and breakfast, and it would change the definition from the traditional bed and breakfast use to just require, so that it would cover Airbnb use as well as the traditional bed and breakfast use. So it would just be one definition. This is what they've done recently on the Sunshine Coast. And the requirement would be that there would need to be a full-time owner caretaker on site in order to do those, because the big issue that we've seen has been concern about absentee owners. And so that's the direction we're working on. We're going to be bringing a report back hopefully in December to speak to some of those issues.
Okay, thank you.
Director Birch-Jones and then Director Race.
Thank you, Chair Rainbow. I should know this, I suppose, but I don't. I imagine that mostly it would be municipalities that would set aside land for housing like what Mayor Elliott just described, which is completely stunning. We don't have anything within the SLRD within any of the regional districts, do we? Just want to make sure
We don't have any land set aside per se, no. We would look at affordable housing on a, basically on a case-by-case rezoning basis. And part of the amendments that I just spoke of, actually, those were to do with rental housing, but we are bringing amendments back on affordable housing as well to amend some of our zoning bylaws in line with the recent housing needs and demand study. And so that recommended that we could look at light density in certain areas, particularly in the more rural areas, whereby we could look to adding carriage houses or secondary suites if they're not allowed as an as-of-right use. So those wouldn't require a zoning amendment. So we are looking at those pieces as well.
One optimistic note is that I know Sequowash Reserve has a very optimistic plan for some affordable housing, would be sort of by Lightfoot Gas, which probably most people know on 99 there, but that would be completely independent of the SLRD process, correct?
Is it within the regional district?
It is, yep.
But it's on the IR?
Yes.
Yeah, so that would be their own initiative. Yeah.
Still optimistic. Thank you.
Claire? Go.
Through the chair, just an additional response to Director Birch-Jones's inquiry about any affordable housing in the SLRD. We do have a zoning amendment application from the Lillooet Nation that will be coming to the board in December. And that is a partnership with BC Housing. It's in the SLRD, but it's a Lillooet project, and that is proposing 36 affordable housing units in a mixed use development. And that currently the land is commercial. It's in the Mount Currie community commercial zone. So it'll be a zoning and OCP amendment for that project to move forward.
Thank you,
Chair.
Claire. I had Director Race and then who said Director Race.
Thank you. And just my question through to Ms. Needham was, do we have any definitions of affordable housing? I think that's one of the topics. But to Director Birch-Jones' point, from my perspective, there's a difference between affordable housing and supported housing. And the housing that was just described by Director Elliott is supported housing. The people that are in there have a variety of different vulnerabilities. And so And so to some extent do our other projects. And so from my perspective, and I guess there's individual thoughts on this, affordable housing is more just a price issue as opposed to other supporting services. But I think that's part of what we need to do today is somehow fasten on that. But I'm just wanted to make sure, looking through the report, I haven't seen any definition or attempt to define the word affordable housing yet. Am I correct in that?
Actually, we've defined it in several places. So it's defined in the regional growth strategy. And in that, we define it as affordable housing means rental or ownership housing price so that monthly payments are less than 30% of gross household income. And that's a standard across the province. And we have similar definitions in our OCPs as well. So generally speaking, it's 30% of gross household income. So. And then we also have requirements set out in the regional growth strategy for 15% affordable housing in new developments.
I have Director Ford and then Director Elliott.
So the 30% of gross income as a benchmark for making something affordable is sort of a one mark on, on a dartboard. It's very difficult it's very difficult for private developers or for partnership developments to hit that with the cost of building today. The biggest reason that Whistler Housing Authority has been successful is because of a massive exchange of land like from the province to the municipality. So having that relatively low cost land or zero cost land and being able to build on it has allowed us to be where we are with 1,900 units of sub-market ownership and rental units. The piece that is super challenging is that as the cost of building goes up, it never goes back down, it seems, to hit that 30%. I think we need to take into consideration the spectrum upon which we define what is affordable and who it's affordable for and who we're trying to house. And that goes back to Director Race's point about it's not social housing necessarily, and it's, something is affordable for everyone. We have a $27 million home in this town. That's affordable for the guy that owns it, but it's not affordable for me. So the spectrum is really important to understand. That's where one of our most recent policy changes in Whistler, we went to a rent geared to income, and that was a requirement of BC Housing. So the grant that we got from BC Housing required us to ensure that a percentage of the units in the building would be targeted rent geared to income. So it didn't eliminate people, it didn't exclude people from our existing wait list. And again, these are rental units that are owned in perpetuity by the Whistler Housing Authority. But so it is a sliding scale of very, very affordable for some, and for some that's still expensive. So it's just important to put that into context. And I hope that what we achieved today is just sort of an understanding of that spectrum and what the need in our region is and how we can achieve that, acknowledging that we don't have an abundance of land and the cost of building is high.
Thank you. Director Elliott?
When I was looking through all the different wording in the OCP bylaws for the different electoral areas. Area C seemed to have sort of the strongest wording around inclusionary zoning for affordable housing. And, but Area D seemed to have quite weak language, even though we capture other parts in the regional growth strategy. So are part of the amendments to sort of better align all of that OCP language in each of the electoral areas?
Yeah, through the chair, yes. So the first step will be bringing some zoning amendment bylaws, but then we'll also be after that bringing some OCP amendment bylaws that'll tie that language together more.
Okay. My second question is around, and I guess this is maybe my lack of knowledge of some of the electoral areas, especially up towards the north, because we haven't done our tour yet, but the federal government's rapid housing initiative is to help convert things like hotels or existing buildings into rental housing. And I wonder if there's any opportunity in our electoral areas that with underutilized hotel stock or large heritage homes that could be transformed into rental housing through the rapid housing initiative.
Kim, do you want to attempt to answer there? Or?
There well could be. I'm aware of some hotels in the regional district. A lot of them are fairly old and somewhat run down. So they would probably take a lot of capital to make them livable for community members. I think that's something that maybe could come up through the electoral area directors if they have some ideas. I think they know their areas a little bit better than I do. I assume though that it would need cooperation from the property owner. And if they have a business that's doing pretty well as a hotel, which might be difficult at this time, they may or may not want to convert.
Director DeMayor?
One of the things that we have in Area A is we got basically 5 small communities spread out amongst the area, and they were all very small. But Goldbridge is the hub. That's where the grocery store is. There's a pub restaurant. We got one motel, and that's where the SLRD building is, where the library is, the ambulance station, and the post office. So it's a central hub. And one thing about that Goldbridge is that there's almost as many Crown properties as there is residential properties. So all those properties, that's what I want to get, first of all, is fuel mitigated, because a lot of it is still raw land, and we've got a lot of debris and dead trees on those lots. That's one thing I'm working on. But the other piece is that those are all, if they could get transferred to some housing, and especially what I just talked about with the Chalath Development Corporation and the BRVCA, is to turn some of those into that type of housing. So there's lots of opportunities, and Goldbridge is the place.
Dr. Elliott?
It's something that I think that everyone should be looking at, because the Rapid Housing Initiative will cover the construction of modular housing, as well as the acquisition of land and the conversion of existing buildings to affordable housing. And so if some of the not-for-profits see the opportunity to acquire a piece of land or to convert a building, there's $1 billion being set aside, which I know won't go very far across the country, but it is something to consider. And I know at least our MP is very interested in seeing if we can take advantage of that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, well, Claire and Kim, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you for the questions, everybody. And we need a resolution to receive the staff report, moved by Director Richmond, seconded by Director Weeb. And call the question. All in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Where are we at now? Chair's verbal update. I think I'm going to spend a couple of minutes in my verbal update talking about what I was trying to do with the 5.2 and 5.3, in which I didn't do very successfully. My goal is, and we've mentioned it during the staff presentation. I would like us to have a comprehensive definition of affordable housing that goes from the level of the supported housing that Karen was talking about through to a level of affordability that would cater to people on a much higher income. So that was my intent, to have a discussion around that and to try to at least make a start in coming up with that. Now, since I wrote that, I recognize, especially when I read through it again this morning, that I've made some provocative statements there, which would have been better if I hadn't have made them. So, the one about should people be allowed to own cars? I mean, that popped into my mind because my parents, when they moved into a seniors housing, it wasn't an old folks home. It was seniors in independent housing. They were not allowed to own a car. There was no overnight parking, and so a condition of being able to live in that place was you don't own a car. Maybe that's something you can't do in Canada. I don't know, but so that's where that came from. And I just feel that anytime we get into a discussion, and I did use unadvisedly really the Wedgwood as an example, not intending to get back into that and re-debate it, but just an example of the most recent time when we've been talking about affordable housing and have been on different pages. We had different standards. There were people talking about walkability and people talking about other things, and we didn't seem to have a reference point. Now, I was talking to Director Elliott yesterday, and she sent me a copy of the Kelowna, what do you call it, sort of policy about affordable housing. And they have a thing called the wheelhouse, and it's a graduated scale from low to high in terms of affordability. And I would like us to get to somewhere like that. But what I'm thinking is that the best course of action, rather than try to, I'd just as soon toss those reports I put in there, but rather than try to get it all done today, I'd like to defer this. We said yesterday that in January, we're going to review our strategic plan and move forward from there. And I think that day, rather than being a committee of the whole, we should set that up in the same way as we set up our strategic planning session, which is a private session. So it's in effect a completely closed meeting, and have that as have affordable housing as one of the things that we spend some time on. I think we all agree that yes, it's important. Housing is important throughout the whole region, and it's important that we try to find ways of providing affordable housing. And then So if we agree on that, then we've got to go the next step and say, what is that affordability? What does it look like? What does it look like in different places? We could, between now and then, spend some time reviewing what has been done in other jurisdictions like Kelowna, listen to what Squamish is doing right now, and hopefully be able to have a good discussion, which will end up with a whatever you want to call it, a template, a policy, a statement, but something like a sort of a one-pager that staff can review, that refer to, that prospective developers can refer to, that anybody can refer to, and understand where we stand on affordable housing. So that's my way of moving into 5.2 and 5.3, and my suggestion is that I don't mind having a brief discussion now, but I really don't want to get into arguments, and I would prefer to defer it and deal with it in January. So I will open the floor now to anybody that wishes to comment or question. Director Race.
Thank you. So with respect, I disagree on a couple of points. One is, I think the discussion should be in the open whenever we have it, because this is a matter of significant public interest. And unless we're talking about the acquisition of a particular piece of property or something like that, then I think it's appropriate to have it in the open whenever we have it. So the second thing is, forgive my phone for going off here. The second thing is, deferring it. I mean, we're all here today. We figured out the sound problem, and maybe just to start staff off or give staff some sense of where we're going or might go, just to go around the board table and give some thoughts on it. I'm sure we've all, after reading the reports, have thought about a couple of aspects of affordable housing and what it means to individual directors, and see where we differ and see where we're on the same page. So I would be suggestive of doing that rather than just sort of putting the whole agenda item off until January.
That's fine. I'd be interested to hear from other people. So do you want me to identify people to speak, or you want to volunteer?
Well, I don't mind starting. I'll give you a couple of thoughts. And so first of all, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think we want to distinguish between affordable and supportive housing that we were describing in the regional moment. And one of the significant differences is that supportive housing needs an operator and ongoing operational support, as opposed to just renting an apartment. My second thought on it is that we should focus on rental as opposed to purchase. And for me, affordable housing is good, clean, adequate rental space where people can live with dignity and afford to live there. But it doesn't necessarily mean ownership, which for me is another level higher and maybe not something we can aspire to. And I know the Whistler Housing Authority has got some ownership units over time, but starting from where we're starting now, I think it's more realistic to think about a rental program. And I mean, half the people in Canada rent their homes. There's nothing wrong with renting their home or the places you live in. So it's not like it's a lower class operation. And the third thing is considering how we manage these things. And we're wrestling with this in Squamish too. Whistler's got the Housing Authority, which has been functioning admirably for years. We don't in Squamish. And so we've got these things coming through the development pipeline, just like the regional district will. And the question is it going to be managed by the developer, by an investor who might buy the unit and just not be able to live there, but just live off the income? And so they buy them at a reduced price, presumably. If it's a 20% discount in rent, then presumably the value of the unit is 20% lower than the one in the building that's at full price. And then who enforces that and how are we going to deal with that to make sure that these things happen? Who vets the next tenant coming in? Who looks for the tenants? What happens if you've got a bad tenant? Whose responsibility is that? So there's some issues around that. If we don't have a housing authority and we want the developer or the investor to run it, that I think we want to kind of set the framework for that. And I don't have the answers to that. There's other people I think will have a lot more experience with this, particularly from Whistler, about how this might work. But those are some of my thoughts about a strategy going forward. And then whether we do see a need for supportive housing, we might. There's no end to the need, I don't think. And so that to me is kind of setting up and going down a slightly different path. Stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Director Elliott, and then I'll come to you, Kim.
Maybe I still have some questions. So in looking back at our housing needs assessment, it talks about an aging population in some of our electoral areas. And I'm curious if we have done, or anyone, even some of the social service agencies have done an analysis of whether folks, it sort of says there tends to be a migration of older folks out to be closer to family or health services as they age. And I guess I want to know, is that true? Or should we actually invest in doing a bit of work around understanding the needs of the seniors in our electoral areas to understand their actual desire? Do they want to age in place, or do they feel like that's their first choice and their second choice is actually to have to move out of their communities to be closer to family or care? And which of those are true? Because I think taking care of that older population is really important. And I don't want to assume that they all will move out or want to move out if there's a solution we can provide. So I'm just wondering if we do have any insight into their actual desire to stay or go.
Through the chair, the housing need and demand study does look at some of the demographic issues and some of those issues. And I think with some of the amendments that we're bringing forward with respect to carriage houses, et cetera, and promoting some sort of light density, that'll help with seniors who want to age in place up to a point. And then I think when people get to a certain age group, they need to be closer to facilities. So we find, for instance, that people that might have been living on the Highline Road, once they get to about 80, 85, they go to Lillooet and because they need more care. Unless somebody has a lot of money and they can afford to have in-house care, usually there's sort of an age point where people need to move away from their homes.
And the reason I ask is because I know that UBCM was doing a lot of age-friendly grants for communities to look at, how people age in place. And I wonder if actually that is something for us to consider regionally, is actually an age-friendly region. Because, I'm building 232 units of seniors housing in Squamish. Well, I'm not. Our seniors group is. And that will sort of take care of our waiting list. But one of the requirements is that you have to live in Squamish for a year in order to apply. And so if we have a migration of seniors, towards Lillooet, what's Lillooet's plans for aged care facilities? And are you planning for it? And if they're moving out of Area D to come into Squamish, what's my plan to receive those seniors? And I wonder if we actually need, as part of this discussion, some thought into could we access a grant fund to do an age-friendly region kind of concept? So rather than looking at it piecemeal, is where would that migration go? At what age does that happen? What will we see that Lillooet would need to build, or Whistler or Pemberton or me, to move people closer to primary care or other supports? that would be really interesting, I think, for us to consider when you look at just how much older the demographics are in areas A and B specifically. So that was just some of my initial thoughts. I've got more, but I'll turn over the mic to others.
Kim, briefly, and then I've got Director Ford.
Yeah, I'll be brief. So I think definitions are important, but when we receive applications for affordable housing, which are few and far between in the regional district, what we've found is we know what that animal looks like when the applicant comes to us. We know exactly who the target is and what kind of user, end user would be in those units. I think from a staff perspective, the concern about levels and definition is probably less important. I think for us, the questions come up around geography and where does the board want to see affordable housing land? I think everybody's pretty clear that what we call light density, little bits of infill onto a single family lot where we might allow a carriage house or a suite are generally seen as fairly acceptable. It's where we get the larger projects, the infill projects that are townhouses or maybe an apartment. I think where we need clarity is in what areas of the regional district is the board willing to accept these sorts of projects? Because we have a lot of language in all of our policies that seems to support these kinds of projects. But I think there has been a lack of clarity as to what the criteria is for accepting a project. For instance, our regional growth strategy seems to support some infill in serviced residential areas, but I'm not sure that that's something that the board is actually interested in. Most of our regional district, most of the rural areas are not on transit lines. They're not near services. And they're not serviced land either. And so I think we need to turn our minds more to geography than definitions. Like what are we willing to accept? And if we're not really willing to accept anything more than light density in our rural areas and in our regional district, in our electoral areas, then perhaps we need to think about changing our policies, because I think there might be a misalignment of what our policies say and what we're willing to accept.
Thank you. Director Ford.
Thank you, Director Needham. That's helpful clarity pertaining to many of the conversations we've had over the last, as long as I've been on the board. Because I think it really is important to understand what was the motivation behind the RGS and how do we remain faithful to its intent. When I initially put my hand up, I was going to say that it's interesting that there are going to be 232 units of seniors homes of seniors housing, which is different than seniors homes, in Squamish. We recently built and occupied, it's been open just about a year now, 21 units that were built by a developer for the Whistler Housing Authority. And the criteria for the people moving into that was that they had to meet the definition of a senior. And in Whistler, the definition of a senior is that you have to have worked 10 of your last 12 working years in Whistler. That's significant. And there was all kinds of means test as well as that. So what we found was that, and what we struggle with is there are many people in our community who are potentially original residents, have been here more than 40 years, and they may own their home outright, but the appreciated value of their home, makes the cost of living difficult. And so they would like to downsize and make their 4-bedroom home available to, you know, to a young family, and then live off what they sell their home for. But it's really, really challenging because then there's all kinds of, well, there are all just so many different opinions about, is that fair? Is that what these affordable units are being built for? Or should it be, you know, so it's a really, really difficult thing to put a definition to, I guess. But I guess just to put my thoughts to the conversation about what Director Needham was saying is, where's the geography that can receive that type of density? Because I think we can all agree that the more dense you can make a development, the less intense it is on the land. You know, like everyone that I talk to about tiny homes think that tiny homes are the greatest thing ever because you get your own space, you get your own 4 walls, you don't have to share walls with neighbors or have people above you or below you. But it's not smart land use. It's great in places like Detroit where land is very inexpensive, but it doesn't make sense where land is very expensive. So where in the geography of the regional district makes sense for that kind of density? And I think we probably could look at a map and put some pins in that. And I kind of excited to do that kind of an exercise. I think that'd be kind of neat. I don't have any suggestions.
Okay, thank you. Director Richmond.
Thanks, Director Ford. I think you gave a lot of context there, and I think you answered a good portion of Ms. Needham's question, or search for clarity from the board. I think I would not remove from our policies some of the language that Ms. Needham suggested. I think your point of geography is really important, Kim, and I think identifying as a board within the different areas and at the region as a whole, through again the spectrum that was mentioned of affordability, what is more needed where. So I was going to put up my hand earlier and talk about seniors aging in place, and I think it was Director Elliott that brought it up. That's a real issue for many of our urban or rural aging residents who, you know, they're used to space, they're used to autonomy, they're used to you know, a lot of independence. So moving from that right to even Pemberton or Lillooet is already difficult, let alone going to the big city of Squamish. So I think that we could, like Dr. Ford said, I think we could put some pins on them in the map with different needs in different areas, using that spectrum. I think the needs, as we've identified before, are very different in Area A than they are to Area D in terms of that affordability spectrum. So I think that would be a helpful exercise. As with almost everything we discuss at this table, there's definitely not a one-size-fits-all for our regional district, and our you know, housing survey that we did there, that's helpful. But I think we as a board, maybe to be more clear, need to put those pins on a map and decide what the highest levels of priority are in the different geographies, and then how those are supported, right? You know, what kind of housing and where it makes most sense. So I think that's the direction we can continue going, in my mind.
Thank you. Director Weeb.
I don't know if this is appropriate for this conversation, but I'm going to bring it up because Lillooet keeps being mentioned as where the seniors are going to come. And I know it's mainly because we have the medical facilities here. But it also puts us in a different category as far as a tax base and the amenities that we can add if we want to draw younger people to our community. I know Interior Health is looking at expanding or adding a few more suites to either Red Rock or Sumac. But like I say, I also want it kept in the perspective of how we operate as a district here in Lillooet when we don't have all the amenities that we need, or even being able to keep up with our infrastructure and whatnot, when we end up with specifically seniors only. So I think when we're putting pins on a map, we have to consider that as well.
Thank you. So, Director Demir.
Yeah, interesting conversation. And because we have such a large non-resident property owners here, and a lot of the older non-resident property owners have recently sold their properties, and we got a much younger population of the non-resident property owners that have bought those properties. And we've got a few subdivisions that have happened in the last while. Our little school here at one point, not too long ago, only had 2 students, and now we've got 10. So up in Braylorn, a lot of the properties have also sold to younger population, and some of them are living there full time now. But in the I'd say the past 8 years, there's been a number of full-time residents, the older population, that have actually moved to Lillooet and bought places there. And for that reason, because of the closeness to the medical. But we are working, I am working, and Vivian also is working with the Interior Health on a primary care network. And I think that might change a few things moving forward for the older population that's living here, that is actually living here. And there's a number of us. This is where I want to live. And I don't really want to go to Vancouver or Squamish, maybe to Lillooet if it ever gets to that point. But I know most of the seniors that live here, especially in, let's say, Goldbridge or Braylorn, they're living there because of the cost of living. It's not that high. So, yeah, at Gun Lake and Untitled Lake, it's a little bit higher, but yeah, that's my take on it. And that's why, to me, the good location is Goldbridge. I know I've been working, trying to get them to become a legal organization, and hopefully they will. But there was a little survey done by the person that's trying to get that organized, and they don't want a lot of townhouses or multi-unit suites. They want small individual little houses. And we do have, like I said earlier, a lot of Crown property in Goldbridge. So that's what I see happening. And hopefully we can get some with this primary care network, that we can actually have more physicians coming out to our area. Thanks.
Thank you. I've got Director Race and then Director Crompton.
Thank you. Geography is an interesting thing, and I think for seniors or affordable housing generally, you know, I think we can probably come up with a couple of simple thoughts, and one is that, you know, it would have to be close to services, and the other is close to employment, with good transit to get there. Because let's face it, with limited resources, I mean, we're not going to stick, as much as it might be a nice place to live, we're probably not going to have a development at the far end of Pemberton Meadows or something like that. It would be closer to some of the employment and population densities that we have. Municipalities, it's not such an issue because we're starting off with a confined area anyway. But even then, I mean, in Squamish, there's some places that are appropriate and some not because of transit and issues like that. So I think that, you know, when you start to look at where the population centers are, that pretty quickly takes you to where we might consider locating these. And there isn't one size fits all, and there may be exceptions to that. But you know, you can just look in the regional district. We only have about 2 or 3 population centers apart from the municipality. that might support affordable housing projects. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. Kim and then Director Crumpton.
Yeah, just one point on the geography issue. The housing need and demand study did look at geography. It looked at locations where density could be landed, and that will be part of the amendments that we're bringing forward to the zoning bylaws as requested by the board. I think my question is really more about serviced areas. So we don't have many serviced areas that could land a project, let's call it a senior, whether it be a seniors project or another kind of affordable housing project. Mostly the areas that we have for serviced areas are Pinecrest, Black Tusk, and Wedgwoods. And I guess the question I think is really more a philosophy, are we willing to look at any kind of infill of any kind of housing projects in those serviced residential areas? I think putting pins on a map, I don't really think we need to necessarily do that per se. We've already looked at that. It's really more, are we willing to accept that or not? And if we're not, I do think we probably need to clarify some language in some of our documents.
Thank you, Kim. Director Crumpton.
Thank you for that. I'm interested in Director Needham's comments that if the SLRD wants to restrict the location of new affordable housing, we may want to amend the RGS. This is not a new conversation. Kim and Claire and I traveled all over the regional district in 2018, consulting with residents about their thoughts on some text amendments to the RGS that the board felt strongly about. And we spent time in Lillooet. We drove all over the place. And we made these text amendments that that I think adjusted and clarified the way we think about where density should sit. So my question is to Director Needham. What was your understanding of the text amendments that were made as it relates to density in the regional district in 2018? Well,
We did make clarifications that major development was to be landed in the member municipalities. That's clear. I think what's not clear is the board's perception of adding density to the service residential areas. So the service residential areas do not prohibit additional growth. So they're not supposed to be landing significant development. But I guess it's unclear as to whether infill development in the serviced residential is acceptable.
So you just used the word major and significant. What's the actual text that was added to the RGS?
I don't have the RGS in front of me right now. Claire might have that.
It's the frame of the whole document, correct? So it's right at the beginning.
Essentially, the amendment that was made to the RGS basically said that major settlement should be focused on the member municipalities. That's the gist of it.
I don't think it used the word major, did it?
Have to pull that up. But that was the gist, is that should be the focus.
I would appreciate those two sentences, because we took so much time and energy and we consulted so widely and we talked about it so much at the board, be brought back for our consideration, because I don't believe it had words like significant or major. I think, in fact, what changed was it said additional density should be focused in member municipalities and existing master planned communities. And I think it's existing that was added to the document. And again, you know, and I know, and we know that that was a large and exhaustive process. And I believe it gave us a significant amount of clarity that it seems we're about to go back and revisit 2 years after we spent a significant amount of time considering it. So I have a couple other comments. One is, I just want to say, I believe the RGS provides the context that we need to consider this, and it's why we do things like the RGS. They're meant to provide direction and clarity to our staff as they make decisions about what comes in front of us. And especially when things are that near term to us, they should be taken very seriously. And I don't, that sounded like I was saying I don't think our staff are. I think our staff do, and I think that that's good. I recall the 2016 meeting that Director Needham talks about when a Sea to Sky Housing Authority was scuttled. And I always felt like that was an unfortunate decision and went in the wrong direction. And so if there's interest in this group to revisit that, that is certainly something that I think would be valuable. I don't like when the word affordability is used against us because I think that there is so much, and I thought Councillor Pettengill said it really well in a couple of our meetings, that affordability is not just the cost of the house. And I think that it's important that we recognize that there is a lot tied up in defining something as affordable. Well, when you build it way, way, way away from services in an area that is recommended to not have additional density. And so the price to buy the land is actually lower because there's not an expectation that would get built on in the future. In fact, some sites in our regional district have covenants on them that say they shouldn't be built on. And so then the price would be even lower. And so you get a parcel of land like that, and then you can say the project here is affordable. And yes, the price is lower for a myriad of reasons. One important one is the fact that we are not planning to have density in that location. And I believe that a lot of this has to do with choices. We have limited land. We have limited, especially now, I think, limited labor and capacity to build things. And we have decisions to make about where we do things in the region. And that's, I guess, why I feel strongly about our framing documents. It sounds like part of what these text amendments that are going to come back to us are going to consider is that Black Tusk, Pinecrest, and Wedgwoods are great places to add a bunch of new affordable housing. And that lack of coordination between the member municipality and the regional district, for me, is a concern that we should put our minds to. I certainly feel that if we're not coordinated, we're going to be making decisions that are not as good as they could be if we were coordinated. So I would just point us back to the fact that we did this in 2018, and this is not, in my opinion, a new conversation. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to it.
Thanks, Director Crumpton. There are a couple of people that haven't spoken. I don't know if they wish to. Director Mack, Director Birch-Jones. Okay, the only comment I have about, I just respond a little to what Director Crompton just said, is that I agree. You look at the amendment that we did in 2018 to the regional growth strategy. It's very clear to me that we're suggesting that the majority of development, I can't remember, I'm trying to pull it up, but I can't. that most development will occur in existing municipal areas, and that plus the two or the three areas that are designated as master plan communities. I mean, one of those is Porto, and who knows whether anything will ever happen there, but the other two are Britannia and Furry Creek, and things are happening. So, you know, if we're going to do something, I can't participate in the discussions about Furry Creek, but presumably there will be some demand on the developer to provide a certain percentage of affordable housing. What kind? What are you looking for there? It seems to me that we need to have that spectrum of housing, so that you can talk to that developer about that. But the other thing about the RGS is that on our website, if you look for the RGS, there are two statements in there that I don't think the amendment, it doesn't appear to me that it displaces those statements. If it's intended to do that, then maybe we do need to review, because it still mentions the three areas of Pinecrest, Black Tusk, and Wedgwoods as service residential areas where there's a possibility of further development. It also mentions villages. I believe Darcy is one that is actually named, but I'm not sure of that. But it mentions village areas where there could be some development. So we haven't, within the RGS, we haven't excluded any kind of development in rural areas. We just need to be really clear about what is acceptable and what's not. So I don't think a further amendment to the RGS is necessary, but some clarification of what we actually say in there. It's important that we all understand that and are on the same page. And I'm not sure that we are at the moment.
Can I say one more thing, Chair? Sorry.
Sure.
Specific to Black Tusk, Pinecrest, and Wedgwoods, the service center for those three places is Whistler. And the feedback I get when I share my concern in the past, and this excludes the people around this table, has been, if you're so concerned about it, expand your boundaries. I think that's a fair concern, a fair point. And there's lots to that conversation about expanding our boundaries. And I think something at some point we may well want to move toward. But the RGS, I believe, and I think that's the first time I've heard someone say it doesn't restrict additional development to those places. My sense of things is I'm surprised, frankly, that we're talking about, we've had conversations about Wedgwoods, but I'm surprised we're throwing Black Tusk and Pinecrest in there now. And we're all of a sudden part of a committee of the whole discussing a whole new set of developments built right on the edge of a municipal boundary, leaning heavily on municipal services and spending no money to keep those services whole. And I'm challenged by that. I think that we should, as a regional district, be challenged by that if that's the direction that we're going. So it'll be news to my planning department, to our planning department at the RMOW, that Black Tusk and Pinecrest are now a part of this conversation, and it'll be very surprising for them.
I guess I'm surprised that you say we're introducing something new. All I'm doing is reading what is in the RGS. Those statements, I didn't make those statements up. I didn't find them especially for today's meeting. They're in the RGS. So what do we mean by them? Maybe it should have been taken out.
I think when you would take the RGS decision about new developments being focused on those 3 master plan communities and the member municipalities, I think what we're talking about is, small scale, a lot subdivided here, a couple lots subdivided there. I don't think what we're talking about is 60 units of affordable housing that is going to really, I think, necessitate some commercial and some transit and those things that are there to support community, those things that require services. Okay. So I think you're reading into that mention in the RGS a much broader definition than what was intended. I could be wrong. Maybe it was intended, and then we have a bit of a conflict in our RGS between additional density. But my concern is, where does it stop? Because it'll be Black Tusk, Pinecrest, it'll be the Sioux, it'll be all of these, wherever there's a piece of flat land close to Whistler, we could see ourselves bringing something like this to the table. And then the same would be true in Pemberton, Squamish, and Lillooet. And my sense of what we did in 2018 was to say, no, that is not the direction that we want to go.
Thank you. Claire, did you want to say something? Please.
I just thought I could offer, I have the RGS up here. If it's helpful for the board, I could read out some of those sections that are being discussed right now.
Sure.
Excellent. So the under goal 1.1 strategic directions, the SLRD and member municipalities agree that the settlement planning maps will be used in conjunction with official community plans to bullet 1, direct growth and settlement development towards member municipalities and existing SLRD master plan communities, maintain the rural low density character of service residential and rural residential areas, protect and maintain non-settlement areas. Now, I think another interesting definition to bring into the fold, we've been speaking of service residential areas. The other designation we have in the RGS is rural communities. And this was brought up by Director Demare as well, as, when he's speaking of Goldbridge, but I thought it also might be helpful for the discussion to read out the definition of rural communities in the RGS, and it reads, are historical small-scale settlements such as Mount Currie, Darcy, Seton Portage / Schlath, as shown on the regional settlement planning map. The objective for these areas is to encourage compact residential and local commercial and small-scale mixed-use developments within distinct small villages or development nodes with community water and sewer services. And I'll just leave it there just to support discussion.
Chair?
Claire, can I just ask, is there not a section in there that mentions those other 3 service communities?
Oh, I can read the definition for serviced residential, if that's helpful.
Yes, please.
Means a settlement development that contains primarily residential uses serviced by community water and or sewer systems. And it does speak to, I just have the definition section up right now, but there are further details within the body of the RGS as well, which I can dig into.
Okay, thank you. I've got Director Ford, Director Elliott, Director Crompton.
I've been reading this along as you were reading. It says, will be located at Black Tusk, Pinecrest, and Wedgwoods as shown on the settlement map. The objective for these areas is to maintain rural character, encourage compact, clustered, low density, and primarily residential development with community water and sewer surrounded by non-settlement resource lands. So I think that that is super relevant to this conversation because it doesn't contemplate commercial and it doesn't contemplate growth beyond its current footprint.
Great, thank you very much. That's helpful. Who did I have next? Director Elliott.
So one of the things in listening to the conversation so far is that I absolutely do think we need to adopt some sort of spectrum or wheelhouse or some model that defines what we mean. And then I think as a regional district, we need to decide about things like supportive housing and where they might go. Because, you know, if we take the emergency shelter piece, where do those exist? And I think we should be able to clearly point to that in the regional district. And do we have enough of them, or is there a gap somewhere? Where do we have short-term supportive housing? So let's take women fleeing violence. Do we have short-term supportive housing in all areas of the district where it's needed? Or do women have to go far from their homes in order to find safety? So is that a need? And where do we have resources, and where might we need more? And our social service agencies can help us with that. Long-term supportive housing. So this can be people with developmental disabilities. This can be seniors. This can be people with mental health and addictions issues, what have you. But where does that belong? Where do we have it, and where does it belong? So I think it's so important to define what these mean for us in the regional district, where we have them, and where we have a gap, and how we might fill that gap. And then that addresses the geography piece that Director Needham was speaking about, but also presents clarity for us as a board, and also for any developers that are looking to create projects, especially with the amendments that are coming around inclusionary zoning and putting affordable housing or below market housing into the mix. So I think for me, it's both really clear definitions and really clear geography about where we think it belongs. And we do need to look at this from a regional level. Where are our health supports? You know, I didn't mean to imply, Director Weave, that all the seniors were going to Lillooet. You guys are growing because young families are looking for affordable places to live. And so that's the same for me. Our fastest growing demographic is seniors, but our biggest cohort is like the under 14s and the young families. And so how do I do both? And what is the regional, and will I get more as our seniors population ages in the electoral areas? And I have no visibility into that right now at all. So I think adopting a model where we've got really clear definitions of the spectrum and where we think it belongs in the region is a really good idea. I think our RGS is very clear to me, and I don't think it needs to be changed. But I think that the topic of affordability is hugely complex. And so I think the more clear we can be in that conversation, the better off we'll be.
Thank you. I had Director Crumpton and Director Richmond.
What I have wanted to say has been said. I agree just so strongly with Director Elliott on the concept of trying to take this on regionally. I think that's exciting. I think we often talk about service sharing and those type of things. But if there's anything that we should be sort of aligned on, I think our effort around supportive, affordable, a term that I'll throw into the mix because there are so many. I agree on the idea of a wheel. Let's get something like that done. And a concept that we talk about a lot here is resident restricted housing, which means only that the person who lives in it needs to be a resident of the community. And so we have employee housing. There's all kinds of different terms that I don't see that will come into our wheel here that clearly aren't in the Kelowna wheel. But in my view, if we decide to take on housing from a regional perspective, that's an enormous task, and man, is it ever exciting. So thank you for this conversation. I'm excited about it.
Thank you, Dr. Crumpton. Dr. Richmond?
I'm good. What I was going to say has already been said. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Kim, go ahead.
I just want to clarify something. The amendments that are coming forward are based on the amendments that were suggested by the Housing Need and Demand Study. They're to do with allowing for light density to occur in some of the rural areas. And so I just want to make it clear, we're not bringing any proposals to develop the service residential areas. That's not part of it. And the amendments we're making are based on a board resolution asking us to implement the Housing Need and Demand Study. And the other thing I just wanted to note is that I think for me, it would be helpful if we were clear when, I think Director Elliott made some great points about looking at housing in the regional district, but I don't really see, and neither did the Housing Need and Demand Study, see that long-term housing and supportive care housing would find a landing place in the electoral areas. So I think when we say regional district, I think it's important to note that that likely doesn't include our electoral areas. It's probably more looking at where our needs are in the member municipalities.
Director Crompton and Director Elliott.
I think Director Anita makes a good point. The way I'm thinking about this is that not everything lands everywhere. So supportive housing may not end up in Pemberton any more than it'll end up in Area C, but it may be in Whistler. And we may have employee housing in Pemberton, but not in Whistler. That wheel, I think, will be so useful as we think through it. But when I talk about the regional district, I'm talking about Lillooet, Squamish, Britannia Beach, and Wedgwoods. Like, for me, that's what a regional approach would look like, and not everything lands everywhere.
Thank you, Director Elliott.
I agree. I didn't mean for my comments to infer that we would put supportive housing in the rural areas, but I think it's important for us as a region to understand and show where it is and if there are any gaps. And I think that that's the important part of having that wheel, is so that we can say, here's how the whole wheel is represented within the regional district. And here's where the regional district is going to focus. And it might be on those bottom two portions of the wheel, which is around subsidized below market housing and rental housing, and low density additions, like secondary suites and carriage homes. So we may choose where we're going to focus our efforts, but I think we should be very aware as a region about where it all is and who's taking care of it. And if there are gaps, that's an alert to me or Lillooet or Whistler or Pemberton that we might have to find a creative solution for one of those gaps. But I think that is the work of a region, to help us create the big picture. And then the municipalities can pick up the slack where it's certainly our responsibility to do that. But I think we might surprise ourselves and see a need that we weren't anticipating in some of our electoral areas, and we shouldn't discount that either.
Thank you. I'm just trying to think of, we seem to have got to a point where we perhaps need a resolution to move forward, to give some guidance to the staff as to what we might like. Director Elliott talked about the wheel, the definition, whether we use that wheel or whether we have our own, develop our own thing, plus the look at the geography of the area and so on. Director Crompton.
Feels to me like staff have heard us and they've participated significantly in this conversation, and maybe they could bring back a report on a regional, and this would not happen soon because this is about to be an enormous resolution, but to bring back a report on a regional approach to housing, and a housing wheel, like I don't know what that's called, but a some thoughts on a regional wheel, and then we could have a deeper conversation about housing as part of a committee of the whole.
Director Elliott.
Through the chair, I think my colleague is biting off more than we can chew. And maybe if we just started with a definition, that would be a really good start, and understanding where all these different forms of housing are situated in the region and where our gaps are. I think that would be hugely helpful to the board as we contemplate the changes that staff are bringing forward. And then if we see that we should take a regional approach to housing, maybe that's the next step. But I think we should start with a step that we have the resources and capacity to do. Would be my suggestion.
Was that a resolution, Director Elliott? Director Elliott, are you moving that we?
I appreciate Director Crompton's ambition always.
Am I?
Can I just say, Kim and Claire, thank you very much, Director Elliott.
Director Elliott, was that a resolution?
Yeah, I think my resolution is for staff to bring back a model for the housing continuum with definitions that meet the needs of the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District.
Second.
Who said that? Was that Director Crompton? Did you second it? Yes, you did. Very good. Any other discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Well, Kim and Claire, I'd like to thank you very much for your participation, your information. And directors, I'd like to thank you very much as well for a very civil conversation. I was worried with going into it, given the way that I'd presented my thoughts. So thank you very much for cutting me some slack, and I think this has been very useful.
Hey, Chair, are we going to allow people to own cars in the end? I apologize.
Yes, but we're not going to allow them to wear purple and blue scarves. So,
only electric.
So we're going to move on. 5.4, broadband. Okay. We've had a number of conversations. I've got this. I can't access my other screen. We've had a number of conversations about internet services. It's been very clear with some of our Zoom meetings that there are areas of the regional district that are not very well served at the moment. So the suggestion was made to me at some point that we should have a regional approach to this. So I don't know whether we need to discuss it that much. I've got the three things there that we basically figure out what are the current levels throughout the region, not just district by district, but throughout the whole region, and that to recommend that the staff provide guides. It will likely be necessary to hire a consulting company to do most of the work. So there's a cost involved there, and that we ask staff to bring back a report outlining a proposal complete with an assessment of the costs. So Patrick, in one of our meetings with Patrick Weiler, he suggested that that would be a really good thing for us to do, and that he would be prepared to meet with us and help us move forward with improvements in this area. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion. Director DeMayor, then Director Richmond.
At the UBCM meetings, one of the sessions I was on bandwidth for rural communities. From that, the area director up in the Caribou regional district started a little group, and I'm part of it. We've had one meeting already, and we've got another one scheduled next week. And one of the things that some of the communities talked about was that some of the regional districts actually have a broadband committee. So I actually went on to the one from up north onto their website and just had a look at their minutes. And it's interesting that the issues that they've got are exactly the issues that we've got in Area A. And that's being able to get funding. And it's difficult for rural communities. One of the issues that we've got is that we have basically our internet services 10 download and 1 upload. And a lot of the applications that are out there, you have to have 50 upload, 50 download and 10 upload to even get some of that funding. So it's definitely a major issue throughout all of BC. And just the way that some of the funding sources are set up aren't proactive to communities that have really low bandwidth like we have in our area. So that was just one concept I think that maybe we could look into, is having a broadband committee.
Okay, thank you. Director Richmond, and then Director Elliott.
So just to be clear, the direction you're suggesting for staff is to come back with an estimate how much it would, in terms of analyzing the needs and a regional district approach at this point. That's all you're looking for right now, to bring that to budget. Is that your suggestion?
I think we need to have an idea of what it would cost to hire a consulting company. Yeah, I think that's the first step. There are budgetary considerations there. So
yeah, absolutely, that's why I was asking. Thank you.
Yeah. Who else did I have? Director Elliott, sorry.
Yeah, that was my question, is do we have some budget somewhere? And also if MP Weiler had indicated a timeline. So if we're going to be competitive to go after some of this funding, how fast do we need to be?
I don't have the answer to that. I guess basically I wanted to know that, one, we think it's a good idea to do such a study and to pull all that information together. And if we agree that it is, then we should authorize staff to investigate. And I'm not sure how that happens. Melanie, you can tell me how that happens, but find out what it would cost us and what a timeline would be.
I'm certainly supportive of the direction.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, staff can look into that. There are other regional districts that have completed studies of this nature, so we should be able to get an idea on timelines, costs, what's involved, that kind of thing. What level of commitment, even with consultants, there would be a staff commitment, a significant amount of time. So to bring back a sense of what that picture looks like for the board's further consideration.
Is it possible to do that by the next meeting in November? No, maybe.
It depends on what the level of priority of the board is. If we have to do that by November, it may impact other priorities that the board has already tasked staff with. And so it's at your discretion where you would like us to focus our time.
Okay. Director Richmond, did you have a comment?
No, I was just going to make the motion that staff investigate, some other regional district studies and bring back a cost estimate to move forward. I wasn't going to put a date on it, though.
Oh, okay. Can I have someone second that? Yeah, second, Director Webb. Sorry, Director Race.
Thank you. I think for me, at least, that's part of it, looking at other regional districts, for example. But I think for me, it would be helpful just a survey of our regional district to get a real good sense of where the gaps are And then I think also where it might be realistic to try to fill the gaps, because some of the areas are obviously pretty remote, and that's not near-term filling. But we do have pockets of settlement, and Area A is an example where there is certainly a need, and there are certainly people there. But I think that's the kind of thing that, and then my recollection is that at the start of this pandemic, the federal government poured a whole bunch of money into rural internet and bandwidth because everybody was trying to live by the computer like we are right now. And so, so I'm not sure about the time sensitivity. I think we'd want to have a handle on that. My guess is that this pandemic funding is not going to last forever, just for all kinds of practical reasons. And so I think we would want to get on that bandwagon if that's the way it's going right now and there's money out there flowing, we should take advantage of that. So I would start to think we want to get a sense of this sooner rather than later. Support the motion, but I think that's, to me, that's the important direction.
Okay. I can certainly talk to Patrick Weiler and check with him in terms of any deadlines that might be fast approaching. I didn't think they were that tight, but I don't know. Director Demir.
I think staff should also look into any funding available for such a project, because there's probably funding out there just for that.
Okay, so our motion right now directs staff to bring back to us a report of what it would cost to hire a company to do a survey of the whole region. So let's deal with that motion, and maybe we got a second one to follow up. So let me call the question on that. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now, let's go back to what Director Demir just said. Could you see that as being a separate motion that for staff to look for funding opportunities?
Yes, for that survey.
For that survey.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone second that? Seconded by Director Weeb. We'll call the question on that. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you very much. We are down to, do we have any more late business, Melanie?
I haven't received any. Thank you, Chair.
No, what I'm sorry, I don't have my other screen in front of me, so I need Kristen to help me with this. We can adjourn this committee of the whole. So move can I have that move to adjourn by, I think Director Mack just moved that. And all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we're adjourned from the committee of the whole. And Kristen, can you help me with, we need to go back into.
Yes, no problem. So we're going back into item 18 of the open board meeting to adopt the three recommendations from the committee of the whole meeting.
Okay, so I need a motion to that effect, please. Moved by Director Race, seconded by Director Elliott. Any discussion? No. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Where are we at now?
And then then there's going back into the closed if the board wants to do the debrief.
That would be awfully difficult, wouldn't it? Because we're streaming right now, aren't we?
I would, if the board wants to do that, if we can pass the motion to go into closed and recess for a few minutes until the live streaming is confirmed to be down.
Okay. What's your desire, directors? What would you like to do? It's basically enclosed, or all there is to do is the debrief. There's nothing else to deal with. If you wish to do that, then we need to just recess for a few minutes now while Kristen shuts off the live feed. And then we can use the same link, can we, Kristen, once the feed is cut? Okay.
Yeah.
So if we don't want to go back into closed, we're going to adjourn. Okay, so there's your choice.
Move to move in camera. Motion to go in camera.
Motion to go in camera, okay. So how long will that take you, Kristen?
Probably 5 minutes.
Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break and then a 10-minute break. We'll take a 10-minute break and then we'll, so it's now 10:55, so 11:05. Great.